I've spent enough years watching folks to know one thing for certain. The people who get passed over, the ones nobody thinks twice about, they're often the ones with the most to give. It's easy to miss them. Easy to look right through them like they're part of the furniture. But every now and then, one of those invisible souls does something that makes you sit up and pay attention. I saw it happen once in a little dust-choked town out west. The washboard scraped against Clara's knuckles. Raw skin. Pink water. She didn't look up when the laughter came floating down from the road. 2 boys behind the Hutchins fence. Throwing pebbles. Calling out names she'd heard 1,000 times before. A stone hit her shoulder. She wrung the shirt harder. Dawn hadn't fully broken, and already the day was pressing down on her. The creek water was cold enough to ache, and the lye soap had cracked her hands so deep she couldn't remember what smooth skin felt like. 75 cents. That's what Mrs. Harmon would pay her. Count the coins twice, loud enough for the whole store to hear. Another pebble. She didn't flinch. If this story finds you tonight, I'd love to know where you're watching from. And if you've been enjoying these tales without subscribing, consider joining us. It helps more than you know. Main Street smelled like horse manure and fresh bread. Clara kept her head down, moving along the edge of the boardwalk where fewer people walked. The dry goods store was 3 buildings away. Soap, that's all she needed. In and out. She saw him before anyone else did. An old man sat on a wooden crate outside the shuttered blacksmith shop. Fine wool coat, but dusty. Watch chain hanging from his vest pocket. No watch on the end. His hands trembled in his lap, fingers curling and uncurling like he was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. His eyes, that's what stopped her. Clouded. Looking at the street but not seeing it. Mr. Aldridge from the bank walked past, tipped his hat to Mrs. Whitmore across the way, stepped around the old man's outstretched legs like they were a puddle after rain. The preacher came next, Bible tucked under his arm, head turned toward the mercantile window, didn't glance down. A mother with 2 little girls in matching blue dresses. She pulled them closer to her skirts as they passed. The younger girl looked back. The mother tugged her forward. Sheriff Burrell crossed from the jail, boot heels heavy on the planks. He reached Ms. Whitmore, took her arm, helped her down the step. His shoulder passed within a foot of the old man's head. Nothing. Not a word. Not a look. Clara's feet had stopped moving. She stood at the corner of the feed store, soap money clutched in her palm, watching 40 people walk past a man who might as well have been a fence post. Her feet moved anyway. She crossed the street. Dust puffed up around her worn boots. The old man's head turned toward the sound, but his eyes didn't focus. Up close, she could see the dried sweat on his collar, the tremor running through his jaw. She knelt. "Mister, you all right?" His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Stronger than she expected. His fingers dug into her skin. And when he spoke, his voice cracked like old leather. "I can't, the road got all turned around." His grip tightened. "I can't find the way back home." Clara's knees pressed into the dirt. The old man's grip on her wrist didn't loosen. "Where you trying to get to, mister?" His mouth worked for a moment. No sound coming out. Then home, past the red hills. His free hand gestured vaguely toward the south end of town. "There's a windmill. My boy. He's waiting." "What's your name?" A long pause. His eyes drifted, searching for something inside his own head. Samuel. The word came out uncertain. I believe it's Samuel. Clara looked at his coat. Good wool, even under the dust. The watch chain was real gold. She'd handled enough laundry to know the difference between real and plated. This wasn't some drifter. This was somebody's father, somebody's husband, somebody who mattered to someone, somewhere. You got family at this ranch? Someone who can come get you? Samuel's hand finally released her wrist. He rubbed his temple, fingers still trembling. My wife planted them cottonwoods. Eleanor? She had the prettiest hands. His voice softened on the name. White Gate. I remember the White Gate. White Gate? Cottonwoods? Windmill past the Red Hills. Clara's stomach dropped. 2 years back, a cowboy named Jeb had brought shirts to her washtub. Young fellow, bow-legged from too many years in the saddle, smelled like cattle and tobacco. He'd talked while she scrubbed, talked about the Brooks place where he worked, the old man who owned it, the son who'd gone off to politics and never came back. 12 miles past the Red Hills. He'd said, nice spread, good water. 12 miles. Clara looked down at her boots. The left sole was coming loose at the toe. Her feet already ached from hauling water at dawn, from kneeling on rocks at the creek, from standing on Mrs. Harmon's porch while the woman counted coins slow enough to humiliate. She glanced back at Sheriff Burrell, now helping Mrs. Whitmore into a wagon across the street. He'd walked right past Samuel without a second look. They all had. 40 people, and not one of them had stopped. Not one of them would help now, either. She knew how this town worked. If they couldn't see Samuel when he was sitting right in front of them, they sure wouldn't see him when Clara asked for a favor. 12 miles there? 12 miles back? Her laundry clients would be angry. Mrs. Harmon would find someone else. She'd lose a week's worth of work. Maybe more. She looked at Samuel. His hands had stopped trembling. He was watching her face now, and for a moment his eyes cleared just a flicker, but enough for her to see the man underneath the confusion, the man who remembered his wife's hands, the man whose son was waiting. You reckon you can walk that far, Mr. Samuel? He straightened his spine, drew a breath. Used to walk 20 miles for a dance. A ghost of a smile. Reckon I got one more walk in me. Clara stood, brushed the dirt from her knees, reached down and took his arm, looping it over her shoulder the way she'd seen men carry wounded soldiers in the old photographs at the general store. He weighed almost nothing. Bones and wool and whatever was left of a life lived long enough to forget where it started. The first step was the hardest. Not because of his weight, because of what it meant. She was choosing him, a stranger, over her own survival. Second step. Third. The road stretched out ahead. Wagon ruts baked hard in the afternoon sun. Sagebrush dotted the flats on either side. The red hills rose in the distance, hazy with heat. They passed the feed store. Mr. Carlton stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. He said nothing. His eyes said plenty. They passed the church, empty on a Tuesday. The bell hung silent in the tower. They reached the saloon. 3 men sat on the porch. One had his boots up on the railing. Another rolled a cigarette, tongue wetting the paper. The third, a big man with a beard down to his chest, saw them first. Well, he leaned forward, grinning. Slow Clara found herself a sweetheart. The other 2 laughed. The cigarette man slapped his knee. Careful, old-timer, the bearded one called out. She'll wear you out before you get to the edge of town. More laughter. Loud. The kind meant to carry. Clara's jaw tightened. She didn't turn her head. Didn't slow down. Samuel's arm pressed heavier on her shoulder. He was trying to take some of his own weight. She realized. Trying to help. Just keep walking, she said, low enough that only he could hear. I heard him. His voice was steady, clearer than before. Heard worse in my time. They passed the last building, the abandoned livery with the caved-in roof. The road opened up ahead. Nothing but dust and distance. The sun had started its slide toward the hills, turning the light amber and gold. Clara adjusted her grip on Samuel's arm. Her shoulder was already starting to burn. 12 miles. Half a day by horse. Longer by foot. Much longer with an old man who couldn't remember his own name. Behind them, the laughter faded. The town grew smaller. The silence grew bigger. Samuel coughed, cleared his throat. You didn't have to do this. I know. Why'd you? Clara didn't answer. She didn't have one. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They walked. Dust rose around their feet and settled on their clothes. The sagebrush smelled sharp and dry. Somewhere to the east, a hawk circled, riding the thermals, looking for something small and slow. 1 mile down, 11 to go. Clara's left boot caught on a rock. She stumbled, caught herself, kept moving. Samuel's hand patted her shoulder, awkward, gentle. You got a name? He asked. Clara. Clara. He said it like he was filing it away somewhere. That's a good name. Means clear, bright. He coughed again. My Eleanor would have liked you. The road curved ahead, following the dry creek bed toward the first rise. Beyond that rise, Clara knew the land would flatten out again before climbing toward the red hills. She'd never walked it herself, only heard about it from Jeb, 2 years and a lifetime ago. The sun dropped another inch. The shadows stretched longer. Mr. Samuel. Your boy, the one who's waiting. She kept her eyes on the road. What's his name? Samuel was quiet for a long moment. His feet shuffled in the dust. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller. Thomas. The name came out like something fragile. His name is Thomas, and I don't rightly know if he's waiting at all. Clara's stride faltered. The son who'd gone off to politics and never came back. That's what Jeb had said. Never came back? She was walking an old man 12 miles to a home where no one might be waiting for him. And she'd already passed the point of turning around. The mesquite tree offered the only shade for a quarter mile. Clara guided Samuel toward it, her shoulder burning from his weight. 4 miles behind them, 8 still to go. The sun had dropped enough to turn the light soft, but the heat still pressed down like a wool blanket. She eased him down against the trunk. His back scraped against the bark as he slid to the ground. Breathing heavy, chest rising and falling too fast. Clara lowered herself beside him, legs stretched out in the dust. Her feet throbbed inside her boots. The left one, where the sole was coming loose, felt like something was grinding against her heel with every step. Neither of them spoke. A lizard skittered across a flat rock nearby, paused, then vanished into a crack. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called out, harsh and lonely. Samuel's breathing slowed. He tilted his head back against the mesquite, eyes half closed, watching the branches above. The leaves were small and feathery, filtering the sunlight into patterns that moved when the wind stirred. "Water?" Clara said. She'd spotted it while they were walking, a thin trickle running down a rock face about 20 yards back, pooling in a shallow basin carved by years of runoff. "Stay here." She pushed herself up, legs protesting, and walked back to the seep. The water was warm and tasted like minerals, but it was wet. She cupped her hands and drank, then soaked her kerchief and carried it back to Samuel. He pressed the damp cloth to his face, letting the water run down his neck. "Thank you, child." Clara sat back down beside him. Her throat felt better. Her feet did not. "Eleanor made the best pie," Samuel said. His voice came out rough, like he hadn't used it in years. "Apple. Cinnamon so thick you could taste it in your dreams." Clara pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. "Sounds like she was a good woman." "Better than I deserved." He turned his head, looked at her. His eyes were clearer now than they'd been on the street. "Lord knows." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The crow called again, farther away this time. The wind died. The heat settled back over them. Samuel reached into his coat pocket. His fingers fumbled for a moment, searching, then emerged holding something small and pale. A peppermint, white with red stripes, soft at the edges, covered in pocket lint. "Eleanor used to keep these for the grandchildren." He brushed the lint off with his thumb. "Never had any, but she kept them anyway, just in case." He held it out toward Clara. "Go on. Ain't no good to me. Can't taste much anymore." Clara hesitated. Then she took it. The candy was warm from his pocket, sticky against her fingers. She unwrapped it. The paper had fused to the edges and put it in her mouth. Sweet. Too sweet. The kind of sweet that made her throat ache. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had candy in years. Maybe. Her mother used to bring home peppermint sometimes when the sewing work paid well. That was before the coughing started, before the blood on the handkerchiefs, before the silence that filled their little cabin and never left. Samuel watched her. "Good." Clara nodded. The candy clicked against her teeth. "You got family?" he asked. "Husband, children, gone?" He waited. She could feel him waiting, the way you feel someone standing behind you even when you can't see them. But he didn't push. Didn't ask how or when or why. Just nodded, slow, like he understood that some doors stayed closed for a reason. "My Thomas," he said after a while. "He's the only one left. Had a daughter, too. Once. Fever took her when she was 7. Little thing with yellow hair and a laugh like bells." His hands folded in his lap. The trembling had stopped. "After that, Eleanor couldn't. We couldn't." He trailed off, shook his head. "Thomas was everything, and I drove him away." Clara shifted against the tree. The bark dug into her spine. "What happened?" Samuel stared at the horizon. The red hills rose in the distance, hazy with heat and dust. "Pride happened. Same thing that happens to every fool who lives long enough." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Called him too big for his britches. Said he'd forgotten where he came from. He said I never let him leave." A long pause. "Maybe he was right. When'd you last see him? 3 years? Maybe 4? His voice dropped. "Time gets slippery when you're old." Days run together. Faces blur. But I remember that fight. Remember every word like they was burned into my skull. Clara's heel throbbed. She reached down, adjusted her boot, felt the wetness where the blister had started. She didn't look at it. Looking would make it real. "Why you doing this?" Samuel asked. He turned toward her, and his eyes were sharp now, focused. "Ain't nobody does something for nothing. What are you after?" The question hung in the air between them. Clara could feel the weight of it pressing against her chest. She thought about Mrs. Harmon counting coins, about the boys throwing pebbles, about 40 people walking past a lost old man like he was furniture, about her mother dying while she hung laundry on the line, not knowing until she came inside and found the body already cooling. "Maybe I'm tired of nobody doing nothing." Samuel studied her face. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. He nodded once, then looked away. The wind picked up again. The mesquite leaves rustled. A tumbleweed rolled past, slow and aimless, headed nowhere. "Your feet hurtin' already?" Clara blinked. "What? I see you favorin' the left one. Seen you limping since we left town." She shrugged. "They always hurt. Washerwoman's feet." He said it like he knew. Maybe he did. "Eleanor's mother was a laundress. Stood in water half her life. Could barely walk by the end." He paused. "You remembered to drink back there. That was smart." Clara looked at the mesquite branches above. The shadows were shifting as the sun moved lower. "We should keep moving," she said. "I know." Samuel didn't move. "Just give an old man another minute." She gave him 2. Then she pushed herself up, legs protesting, back aching. She reached down and took Samuel's arm, helped him to his feet. He swayed for a moment, then steadied. 4 miles down," she said. 8 to go." "You countin'? Somebody has to." They started walking again. The road curved ahead, following the dry creek bed toward the first real rise. Beyond that, Clara knew, the land would flatten before climbing toward the red hills. She'd never walked this far from town. Never had reason to. Samuel's arm rested on her shoulder, lighter than before. He was trying to carry his own weight. She could feel the effort in the way his muscles tensed with each step. "You ever get letters?" he asked. "No." "Nobody writes you, no family, no friends." Clara's jaw tightened. "Nobody?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Their footsteps crunched in the dust, hers heavy and even, his shuffling and slow. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals, patient and watchful. "Then I'll write you one," he said. "When we get home, first letter you ever got, I promise." Clara's throat closed up. She couldn't answer. Didn't trust her voice. So she just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, the peppermint dissolving on her tongue, tasting like someone else's hope. The sun touched the top of the red hills. The light turned amber, then gold, then something close to fire. The shadows stretched so long they looked like dark rivers running across the land. 4 miles down. 8 to go. And a promise from a man who couldn't remember his own name an hour ago. Clara's left boot caught on a rock. She stumbled, caught herself, kept moving. Samuel's hand patted her shoulder, awkward, gentle. The same gesture her mother used to make when words weren't enough. She didn't know if he'd remember the promise by morning. Didn't know if they'd make it to the ranch before dark. Didn't know what they'd find when they got there, if Thomas was waiting. If anyone was waiting. If the white gate and the cottonwoods were even real, or just pieces of a broken memory. But she kept walking. Because stopping meant going back. And going back meant being invisible again. The hawk dropped suddenly, diving toward something in the brush. Clara watched it fall, fast and sharp, and disappear into the sagebrush. When it rose again, there was something small and still in its talons. Samuel saw it too. His grip on her shoulder tightened. "That's how it goes," he said softly. "Something's always huntin'. Something's always runnin'." He looked at her, and his eyes were wet. "Which one are you, Clara?" She didn't have an answer. The cattle trail appeared where the road forked a narrow path beaten into the earth by 1,000 hooves, winding south toward the red hills. Clara steered them onto it. The ground was smoother here, packed hard by years of use. And Samuel's shuffling steps came a little easier. 6 miles behind them now, 6 more ahead. The sun had dropped below the hilltops, painting the sky in shades of rust and faded lavender. The heat was finally breaking. But Clara's body didn't seem to notice. Sweat plastered her dress to her back. Her shoulder burned where Samuel's arm pressed down. Her left heel felt like someone had taken a hot coal and pressed it against her skin. She didn't stop. Stopping meant thinking. And thinking meant admitting what she'd done, walked away from her life for a man she'd met 2 hours ago. A man who couldn't remember his own son's face. Samuel stumbled. His foot caught on a dried clump of manure, and his weight shifted suddenly, pulling Clara sideways. She braced herself, planted her feet, held him upright. Her back screamed. Her knees buckled for a half second before she locked them straight. "Sorry." Samuel's voice was thin. "Sorry. I didn't. It's all right." Clara adjusted her grip, pulled his arm tighter across her shoulders. "Just keep moving." They walked. The cattle trail curved around a low rise, following the path of least resistance through the brush. To the west, a windmill stood against the darkening sky, wooden slats turning slow in the evening breeze. Clara's heart jumped for a moment before she realized it was facing the wrong direction. Not Samuel's ranch, someone else's water, someone else's home. Her mother's voice came to her then, unbidden, rising up from somewhere deep in her chest. "Kindness costs. Girl, pay it anyway. The Lord keeps track." Clara's throat tightened. Her mother had believed that, had lived it, every day. Even when the coughing got bad and the money ran out, and the neighbors stopped coming around because sickness scared them more than loneliness. She'd kept a jar of pennies by the door for anyone who knocked. Fed stray dogs and hungry children and traveling preachers who promised salvation in exchange for a meal. And in the end, she died alone while Clara hung sheets on a line, not knowing until the silence got too heavy and she walked inside to find the body already cooling in the bed. Kindness costs. The Lord keeps track. Clara wondered sometimes if the Lord had been paying attention that day, if he'd seen her mother slip away with no one holding her hand, if he'd noticed that the jar of pennies was empty by then, given away coin by coin to people who never came back to say thank you. She didn't blame him. Blaming didn't help, but she wondered. The trail dipped into a shallow wash, and Clara helped Samuel down the bank, half carrying him over the loose rocks. His breathing had gotten worse, shallow and quick, like a dog panting in summer heat. His skin was pale under the dust. His lips were cracked. "Rest," Samuel gasped. "Need to... just a minute." Clara spotted a flat rock near the edge of the wash, big enough for both of them. She guided him toward it, lowered him down, then sat beside him. Her legs trembled. Her arms felt like wet rope. A cramp was starting in her right calf, a hot, twisting knot that made her want to cry out. She unlaced her left boot. The laces were stiff with dust and sweat, and her fingers fumbled twice before she got the knot undone. She pulled the boot off, then the sock. Pink. The fabric was pink where it should have been white. Stuck to her heel where the skin had rubbed away. She peeled the sock off slowly. The blister had burst. She could see the raw flesh underneath, wet and angry. Fresh blood welled up in the spot where the fabric had torn the skin. Samuel watched. His face went pale. "Miss Clara?" His voice cracked. "You gotta leave me here." She didn't look at him, reached down and tore a strip from the hem of her petticoat yellowed cotton, soft from years of washing. She wrapped it around her heel, tight enough to stay, loose enough to let the blood flow. Then she pulled the sock back on, wincing as the fabric pressed against the wound. "Go back while you can," Samuel said. "I ain't worth this. I ain't worth your feet." Clara laced up her boot, pulled the knots tight, stood. "You got family waitin'." She reached down and took his arm. "That's more than I got." Samuel's hand closed around her wrist. His grip was weak now, nothing like the desperate clutch on Main Street. "Then we'll share mine," he said. "When we get there, you'll be family too." Clara's chest tightened. She pulled him to his feet, looped his arm over her shoulder, started walking. The wash curved ahead, then rose back to level ground. The cattle trail stretched out before them, disappearing into the purple dusk. The red hills were closer now, maybe 3 miles, maybe 4, close enough to see the shadows of individual boulders on their slopes. A sound reached Clara's ears. Hoofbeats. Coming fast. She turned, squinted into the fading light. A rider crested the rise behind them. Brown horse, lathered with sweat. The man in the saddle wore denim and leather chaps, hat pulled low against the evening sun. He was headed toward town, moving at a steady canter. Clara's heart surged. She raised her free arm and waved. "Mr. Hay! Mr.!" The rider slowed. The horse's ears pricked forward. Clara could see his face now young, maybe 25, with a week's worth of stubble on his jaw. "We need help," Clara shouted. "Please, he's—" The rider's eyes moved from Samuel to Clara, traveled down her body, took in the torn petticoat, the dusty dress, the way she was carrying the old man like a sack of grain. Something shifted in his face. Recognition. Maybe. Or judgment. Or both. He spurred the horse. The animal leaped forward, hooves kicking up dust, and the rider shot past them without a word. Clara watched him go, watched the dust cloud rise and drift and settle, watched until he disappeared over the rise and the hoofbeats faded into nothing. The silence came back, heavier than before. "Folks ain't what they used to be," Samuel said quietly. Clara's jaw was tight. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't tell if it was exhaustion or something else, something darker, something that had been building in her chest since she was old enough to understand that the world didn't care about people like her. Maybe they never was. They stood there for a long moment, the two of them alone on the cattle trail. The sky turning from purple to black above their heads. The first stars appeared faint points of light in the east, where the darkness was deepest. Clara's calf cramped again. She shifted her weight, tried to stretch the muscle without letting go of Samuel. Her vision swam for a moment gray at the edges, like looking through dirty water. She blinked it away. Samuel's weight pressed down on her shoulder. Her heel screamed with every heartbeat. The red hills waited ahead, silent and patient, keeping whatever secrets they held. "We should keep moving," Clara said. "I know." "Can you make it?" Samuel drew a breath. "Let it out slow. Reckon we'll find out." They walked. The stars multiplied. The trail grew harder to see. Clara's feet moved by instinct now, feeling for the packed earth beneath the dust, avoiding the rocks and roots that reached up from the darkness. The wind picked up, cool for the first time all day. It carried a smell she didn't recognize, sharp and dry, like old wood and animal hide. Then she saw it, a shape in the darkness ahead, low and square, walls standing at odd angles against the star-filled sky. A building, abandoned. By the look of it, no light in the windows, no smoke from the chimney, but four walls, a roof, maybe, shelter. Clara's grip on Samuel's arm tightened. "You see that?" Samuel squinted into the dark. His eyes weren't good, she knew that now, but he nodded. "Line shack, maybe. Ranchers use 'em when they're moving cattle." "Think anyone's inside?" The wind gusted. The building's door, or what was left of it, swung open with a long, low creak that echoed across the empty land. The line shack smelled like rot and old smoke. Clara stood in the doorway, letting her eyes adjust to the darkness inside. One room, dirt floor, a pile of hay in the corner, gray with age and dust. The roof had holes in it she could see stars through the gaps, faint pinpricks of light in the black. "Can you make it inside?" she asked. Samuel nodded. He was leaning heavy on her now, most of his weight pressing down on her shoulder. His breathing came in shallow gasps, and his skin had gone cold despite the warmth still trapped in the evening air. Clara guided him through the doorway. The floorboards creaked under their feet, actual boards, not dirt, which surprised her. Someone had built this place to last. That was a long time ago. Now the wood was warped and split, and something had chewed through the corner by the window. She eased Samuel down onto the hay pile. He groaned as his body settled, then went quiet. His eyes closed. His chest rose and fell. Each breath a little too fast, a little too shallow. Clara looked around the shack. No furniture except a broken crate near the door. The window had shutters, but one hung from a single hinge, swinging in the breeze. Moonlight filtered through the cracks in the walls, painting silver lines across the floor. She grabbed the crate and dragged it across the doorway. It wouldn't stop anything that wanted to get in, but it made her feel better, gave her something to do with her hands. Then she sat down against the wall opposite Samuel, knees pulled up to her chest, and let the exhaustion wash over her. Her feet throbbed. Her shoulder ached where his arm had pressed for hours. Her throat was dry despite the water they'd found at the seep, and her stomach had stopped growling sometime around sunset, empty so long it had given up complaining. She should sleep. She knew that. 3 miles left in the morning, and her body needed rest. But she couldn't close her eyes. Every time she tried, she saw her mother's face, the way it had looked when Clara finally came inside from the laundry line. Still, empty, already starting to cool. She hadn't said goodbye. Hadn't even known anything was wrong. The sheets were still wet on the line when she found the body. Samuel coughed. The sound was wet, rattling in his chest. Clara watched him, counting his breaths the way she used to count her mother's near the end. "You awake?" His voice came out thin and rough. "Yeah." He turned his head toward her. His eyes caught the moonlight, two faint gleams in the darkness. "Can't sleep neither. Mine's too busy." Clara didn't answer. She waited. "Thomas," Samuel said. The name hung in the air. "The fight we had wasn't really about politics. That's what I told myself after. That's what I told Eleanor. But it wasn't true." The shutter creaked. The wind pushed through the gaps in the walls, cold now, carrying the smell of sage and dry earth. "What was it about?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. His hand found the hay beside him, fingers digging into the dusty stalks. "Pride," he said finally. "Same thing it's always about when fathers and sons can't talk to each other." Clara's chest tightened. She knew about pride. Had watched it eat men alive in the town, turning them bitter and small. Had felt it herself, sometimes, when she swallowed insults instead of speaking up. "He wanted to leave," Samuel continued. "Wanted to go east, get educated, make something of himself. I told him he was too big for his britches. Said he'd forgotten where he came from." His voice cracked. "He said I never let him leave. Said I kept him tied to that ranch like a dog on a chain." Was he right? The question came out before Clara could stop it. She expected Samuel to get angry, to defend himself the way old men always did when you poked at their wounds. But he just sighed. Maybe. Probably. His hand stopped moving in the hay. "Eleanor used to say I held on too tight, that I was scared of being alone. She was right about most things." A pause. "She was right about that too." A coyote howled. The sound came from somewhere to the east, distant but clear. Then another answered, closer. Then a third, closer still. Neither of them flinched. Clara had heard worse sounds. The rattle of her mother's last breaths, the silence that came after. "Pride's a hard thing to swallow," she said. Samuel laughed a dry, papery sound. "Harder to spit out." The coyotes went quiet. The wind settled. The shack creaked and groaned around them. Old wood shifting in the cool air. "What about you?" Samuel asked. "You got any regrets you're carrying around?" Clara looked at the stars through the gap in the roof. 1, 2, 3. Each one sharp and cold and impossibly far away. "I never said goodbye to my mama." The words came out flat. No tears. No trembling. She'd cried herself empty years ago. "She was sick for a long time. I knew she was dying. But I thought I had more days left. Thought I'd have time to say what needed saying." Clara's hands tightened around her knees. "She died while I was hanging laundry. I came inside and found her already gone." Samuel was quiet, the kind of quiet that meant he was listening, really listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. "She knew, child." Clara's throat closed up. "What? Mothers always know." His voice was gentle. "Every word you wanted to say, every feeling you couldn't put into sounds, she knew. They always do. It's in the way you fold a shirt, the way you carry water, the way you put one foot in front of the other even when you got no reason to." A moth fluttered past Clara's face, drawn to nothing. No candle, no lamp, just moving through the darkness because that's what moths did. "You really believe that I have to?" Samuel's eyes were wet now, catching the moonlight. Otherwise, Eleanor died thinking I never loved her enough, and I can't carry that. Not for the time I got left. The shack fell silent again. Just the two of them breathing in the dark, surrounded by rotting wood and old hay and the endless sky. Clara looked up at the stars. They seemed closer now, somehow, or maybe she just felt smaller. Eleanor used to say stars are God's way of saying, He ain't forgot us. Samuel's voice was barely a whisper. Every time you feel alone, look up. He put those lights there for you. Clara thought about her mother, the pennies in the jar, the kindness that never stopped, even when it cost everything, the faith that never wavered, even at the end. You believe that... Samuel coughed, cleared his throat. Tonight I do. The coyotes started up again, farther away now, moving west. Clara listened to them howl, three voices rising and falling in the dark, calling to each other across the empty land. Samuel's breathing slowed, deepened, his eyes closed, and his body went slack against the hay. Sleep had taken him. Finally. Clara didn't move. She sat with her back against the wall, watching his chest rise and fall, counting the breaths. 12, 13, 14. The moonlight shifted as the night deepened. The silver lines on the floor crawled across the dirt, marking time. Clara's eyes grew heavy, but she didn't close them. Couldn't. Someone had to keep watch. She thought about the morning. 3 miles to go. Her feet in shreds. Samuel barely able to walk. She thought about what they'd find at the end. The white gate, the cottonwoods, the windmill turning in the breeze, and Thomas, the son who'd left and never come back, the son who might not be there, the son who might have forgotten his father the way the town had forgotten the old man on the crate. Clara's hands tightened into fists. What if they got there and no one answered the door? What if the ranch was empty, abandoned? Just another line shack rotting in the sun. What if Samuel had walked 12 miles for nothing? What if she had the question circled in her head like the moth circling her face? No answers. No rest. Outside. The coyotes howled one last time. Then silence. Clara closed her eyes. Just for a moment. Just to rest them. When she opened them again, gray light was bleeding through the cracks in the walls. And Samuel wasn't breathing. Clara scrambled across the dirt floor, knees scraping against the warped boards. Her hand found Samuel's chest, pressed down, waited. Nothing. Nothing. Then a breath. Shallow. Barely there. But real. She sat back, heart slamming against her ribs. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She'd thought for one terrible moment. She'd thought Samuel's eyes fluttered open. Clouded. Confused. Eleanor. No. Clara's voice came out hoarse. It's Clara. We're in the line shack. Remember? He blinked. Looked around the dim room. At the gray light bleeding through the cracks. His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. Clara. The washerwoman. That's right. We're going home. That's right, too. Clara pushed herself to her feet. Her legs screamed in protest, muscles cramping from the cold and the hard floor. Her left foot, she didn't want to think about her left foot. The bandage had soaked through during the night. When she tried to put weight on it, a jolt of pain shot up through her ankle and into her knee. She looked at her boots. The leather had stiffened overnight, shrunken shrunk from the dust and sweat. She tried to pull the left one on. Her heel wouldn't fit. The flesh was too swollen, too raw. She tried again, forced her foot down. The pain made her vision go white around the edges. The boot wouldn't go on. Clara stood there in the gray morning light, one boot in her hand, her bandaged foot bare against the dirty floor. 3 miles to go. Her feet in shreds. An old man who could barely stand. She tore more strips from her petticoat. It was more rags than fabric now, and wrapped them around her foot, layer after layer, until the bandage was thick enough to offer some protection. Then she pulled her sock over the whole mess, unlaced the boot as far as it would go, and shoved her foot inside. The leather pressed against the wound. Clara bit down on her tongue, tasted copper, didn't scream. You shouldn't be walking on that. Samuel had pushed himself up on one elbow, watching her. That foot's bad. It'll hold, Miss Clara. It'll hold. She helped him up. It took 3 tries. His legs kept buckling, and her shoulder was so sore she could barely lift her arm. But they got there. Standing, swaying. 2 broken people holding each other upright. The morning air hit them as they stepped outside. Cool, clean, carrying the smell of sage and something else water. Maybe a creek nearby. Too late to matter now. The red hills rose ahead of them, closer than they'd ever been. Clara could see individual boulders on the slopes, could make out the shadows of mesquite trees dotting the lower ridges. The sun was just clearing the horizon, turning the sky pink and gold. 3 miles, maybe less. They started walking. Clara's foot screamed with every step. The bandages were already soaking through again. She could feel the wetness spreading inside the boot, warm and thick. Her body had gone past exhaustion into something else, something numb and mechanical. 1 foot in front of the other. That's all she had to do. 1 foot in front of the other. Samuel leaned on her, but he was trying. She could feel the effort in his muscles, the way he was fighting to carry some of his own weight. His breathing was better this morning, still shallow, but steadier. That ridge. His voice was stronger too. He pointed ahead, toward a low rise covered in yellow grass. I know that ridge. Used to hunt rabbits there with my pa. Clara nodded. She didn't have breath for words. They climbed the rise. It wasn't steep, but it felt like a mountain. Clara's legs burned. Her lungs burned. The sun climbed higher, and the morning cool gave way to heat. At the top of the rise, Samuel stopped. His grip on her shoulder tightened. There, he whispered. There it is. Clara looked. A valley spread out below them. Green and gold in the morning light. Cottonwood trees lined a creek that wound through the bottom, their leaves flickering silver in the breeze. A windmill turned slowly near the water, wooden slats creaking with each rotation. And at the far end of the valley, maybe half a mile away, sat a ranch house. White, 2 stories, a porch running the full length of the front. The white gate stood at the edge of the property, marking where the road entered the yard. Clara's chest tightened. She'd never seen anything so beautiful, never wanted anything so badly. That gate, that porch, that life she'd never have. Almost there, she said. Don't quit on me now. I ain't quittin'. Samuel's voice cracked. You neither. They started down the slope. The grass was slick with morning dew, and Clara's boots, her one good boot and her ruined one, slipped on the wet stalks. She caught herself, kept moving. Samuel's weight pressed down on her shoulder, heavier with each step. Halfway down, her left foot caught on a root hidden in the grass. She went down hard. Her knee hit the ground first, then her hands, then her face. The impact knocked Samuel loose, and she heard him cry out as he fell beside her. Clara lay there in the wet grass, face pressed against the earth, too exhausted to move. Mud from the dew-soaked ground smeared across her cheek, her forehead, her lips. She could taste it grit and rot and something bitter underneath. She'd walked 11 miles, carried an old man through the dark, given up her work, her income, her future, and now she was lying face down in the mud, 50 yards from the gate, too weak to stand up. The shame hit her like a fist. Slow Clara. That's what they called her. Slow and stupid and useless. They were right. Look at her. Look at what she'd done. She tried to push herself up. Her arms gave out. She fell back into the mud. Clara. Samuel's voice came from somewhere to her right. Clara, get up. She couldn't. Her body was done. Empty. Nothing left. Clara. A shout from somewhere ahead. Not Samuel. Someone else. Clara turned her head, mud sliding across her jaw. Through the blur of exhaustion, she saw a figure running along the fence line. A man. Young. Denim and leather chaps. Ranch hand. He was shouting something, waving his arm. Then he turned and sprinted toward the house. Samuel was struggling to his knees beside her. His hands found her arm, tried to pull her up. The gate, he gasped. Just the gate. A few more steps. Clara's fingers dug into the wet grass. She pulled. Her body screamed. Somehow, impossibly, she got her knees under her. Then one foot, then the other. Samuel's arm went around her waist. They held each other up. Two broken bodies making one functioning pair. 20 steps to the gate. Clara counted them in her head. 19. 18. Her vision was going gray at the edges. 17. 16. The white gate grew closer. The paint was chipped, weathered by years of sun and wind. Up close, it wasn't beautiful at all. Just an old fence, held together by rust and habit. But it was real. It was here. 15. 14. 13. Clara's legs buckled. She caught herself on the gatepost, fingers scraping against the rough wood. Splinters dug into her palms. 12. 11. 10. Samuel was shouting now. His voice echoed across the yard, cracked and desperate. Help somebody help us. Thomas, Thomas. 9. 8. 7. Clara's vision went white. The gate swam in front of her, dissolving into nothing. 6. 5. She felt her legs give out, felt the ground rushing up to meet her. 4. Her knees hit the dirt inside the gate. Her hands followed. her face pressed against the earth. And the last thing she saw before the darkness took her was a pair of boots running toward her across the yard. Not ranch hand boots. Too fine. Too polished. Too governor's boots. Clean sheets. That was the first thing Clara noticed. Cotton so white it hurt to look at. Pressed smooth. Smelling like lavender and something else soap. Maybe. Real soap. Not the lye she used for laundry. She lay still, eyes moving across the ceiling. Wooden beams. Dark with age. A crack ran from one corner to the center, thin as a hair. Sunlight came through a window to her left, falling in a golden rectangle across the floor. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. Her shoulder, her back, her feet, her feet. Clara tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her left heel, sharp and immediate. She fell back against the pillow, gasping. Easy now. A woman's voice. Calm. Practiced. You tore yourself up good out there. Gonna take a few days before you can walk proper. Clara turned her head. A woman sat in a chair beside the bed, middle-aged, gray streaking through brown hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a plain dress, blue cotton, with an apron tied at the waist. Her hands were busy with something bandages. Clara realized, fresh bandages, white and clean. Where am I? Brooks Ranch, guest room. The woman Martha. Clara would learn later set the bandages aside and leaned forward. Mr. Samuel's home. Thanks to you. Clara's eyes moved around the room. A wash basin on the dresser, enamel with blue flowers painted on the rim, a jar of wildflowers on the windowsill, Indian paintbrush, orange and red, mixed with blue bonnets, a quilt at the foot of the bed, double wedding ring pattern, each ring interlocking with the next. Everything clean, everything beautiful, everything she'd never have. How long was I out? Since yesterday morning. You collapsed at the gate. The boys carried you in. Martha stood, moved to the wash basin, wrung out a cloth. Doc came from town, looked at your feet, said another mile and you'd have been crippled for life. Clara stared at the ceiling. Another mile? 3 more steps? That's how close she'd come. Mr. Samuel. Down the hall. Restin'? Martha brought the cloth to Clara's forehead, pressed it against her skin. Cool. Soothing. His mind's clearer today. Remembers most of what happened. Keeps asking about the washerwoman who saved him. Clara closed her eyes. The cloth felt good. The bed felt good. Everything felt good. And that scared her more than the pain. She didn't belong here. Didn't deserve clean sheets and wildflowers and a woman tending her wounds. She was Slow Clara, the fat washerwoman who lived in a shack by the creek. This was a mistake. They'd realize it soon enough. They'd send her back to her life, her washboard, her cold biscuits and lonely suppers. He wandered off yesterday morning. Martha's voice cut through her thoughts. Mine goes sometimes. We got a search party together, rode north toward the canyon. Never thought he'd go south. She paused. Sent word to the capital soon as the boys came back empty-handed. Mr. Thomas. He rode through the night to get here. Clara opened her eyes. Thomas is here. Arrived an hour ago. Went straight to his father's room. Martha looked toward the door. Been in there ever since. The room fell quiet. Clara could hear voices through the wall, muffled, indistinct. A man's voice, low and rough. Then another, higher, cracking on certain words. Then silence. Then a sound Clara knew too well. The sound of a man trying not to cry and failing. Martha looked away, busied herself with the bandages again. 3 years since they seen each other. 3 years of letters that never got sent and words that never got said. She shook her head. Pride's a terrible thing. Clara thought about Samuel in the line shack, talking about the fight with Thomas, called him too big for his britches, said he'd forgotten where he came from. 3 years. That's a long time to carry a grudge. A long time to let silence grow into a wall. The crying stopped. Footsteps moved down the hall heavy, deliberate. A door opened somewhere, closed. Martha stood. "I'll fetch you some broth. You need to eat something." She left. The door clicked shut behind her. Clara lay in the clean bed, staring at the ceiling. The crack ran from corner to center, thin as a hair. The sunlight moved slowly across the floor. She thought about her mother, about the words she'd never said, about the silence that had grown between them in those last months, not from anger, but from fear. Fear of saying goodbye, fear of making it real. And then her mother was gone, and the silence was all that was left. The door opened. Clara turned her head, expecting Martha with the broth. The man who entered was tall, broad-shouldered. His hair was dark, graying at the temples, and he wore a frock coat of fine black wool with brass buttons that caught the sunlight. His boots were polished to a mirror shine, the same boots Clara had seen running toward her before she passed out. Governor's boots. He stopped just inside the door. His eyes were red. His face was drawn, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the ride from the capital. "You're Clara." It wasn't a question. Clara nodded anyway. Thomas Brooks, governor of the territory, stood there for a long moment. His hands hung at his sides, empty. He looked like a man who'd just set down something heavy and didn't know what to do with his arms. "My father told me what you did." Clara said nothing. 12 miles. On foot, carrying him most of the way. Thomas moved closer, stopped at the foot of the bed. "He said you had no water at first, no food. Said your feet were bleeding through your boots by the time you stopped for the night." Clara's hands tightened on the sheets. The fabric was cool against her palms. "He remembers all that. He remembers everything." Thomas's voice cracked on the last word. He caught himself, straightened his spine, rebuilt the wall behind his eyes. "He remembers you asking about me, remembers you asking if anyone would be waiting." The room went quiet. Outside the window, a bird sang 3 notes, rising and falling. Thomas reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a leather pouch, heavy and round. Gold eagles, Clara could hear them clinking inside. He set the pouch on the bed beside her hand. "I don't know how to repay you," he said. 3 years I didn't come home. 3 years I let pride keep me away. And in one day a stranger did more for my father than I've done in a decade." He looked at the pouch. "This is a start. There'll be more. Whatever you need." Clara looked at the leather, at the shape of the coins inside, at the way the sunlight gleamed off the stitching. She could take it. No one would blame her. She'd earned it, bled for it, literally. The money would change her life. She could stop washing laundry, stop scrubbing until her knuckles cracked, stop eating cold biscuits alone in her shack while the world went on without her. She could buy respect, buy invisibility of a different kind, the kind that came with enough money to make people look away. Her hand moved toward the pouch, stopped. She thought about her mother. The jar of pennies by the door, given away, coin by coin, to people who never said thank you. Kindness costs, girl. Pay it anyway. Clara pulled her hand back. I didn't do it for money. Thomas blinked. His face shifted confusion. Then something else. Something like respect. Then why? Clara looked at the ceiling, at the crack running from corner to center, at the sunlight falling through the window, warm and golden. Because somebody ought to. The words hung in the air between them. Thomas stood there, the pouch forgotten on the bed, and Clara could see him working through it, trying to find the angle, the motive, the thing she wanted that he could give. He wouldn't find it. There wasn't one. I went to his room, Thomas said quietly. Before I came here, first time I've seen him in 3 years. He looked at the floor. He cried. I cried. We said things we should have said a long time ago. Clara's throat tightened. That's good. He asked me to thank you. Said you were the first person who'd treated him like a human being in... Thomas's voice broke. He stopped, swallowed. In a long time. People get busy. They forget. You didn't forget. You didn't even know him. Thomas looked at her. And the wall behind his eyes was gone now. Just a man, standing in a guest room, trying to understand something that didn't make sense. Why not? Why didn't you walk past like everyone else? Clara thought about the crate outside the blacksmith shop, the 40 people who'd looked away, the sheriff stepping over Samuel's legs like they were a rain puddle. Because I know what it feels like, she said. To be invisible. To have people look right through you like you're not even there. She paused. Your father wasn't invisible to me. Thomas was quiet for a long time. The bird outside sang again the same 3 notes, rising and falling. Stay, he said finally. A few days? Rest? Let your feet heal? I got work to get back to. The laundry can wait. He picked up the pouch, put it back in his pocket. Stay, please. It's the least we can do. Clara looked at the window, at the wildflowers on the sill, at the clean sheets and the quilt, and the sunlight falling golden across the floor. She didn't belong here, but maybe, for a few days, she could pretend. All right. Thomas nodded. Something like a smile crossed his face, just a flicker. There and gone. I'll have Martha bring you supper. There's something else I want to discuss with you. Tomorrow. When you're stronger. He moved toward the door. Stopped with his hand on the knob. Miss Clara? Yeah. My father was right about you? He looked back over his shoulder. You're the first person who's treated him like a human being in a long time. That means something. More than money could ever repay. He left. The door clicked shut behind him. Clara lay in the clean bed, staring at the ceiling. The crack ran from corner to center, thin as a hair. The sunlight moved slowly across the floor. Something else I want to discuss. She didn't know what he meant. Didn't know what a governor could possibly want to discuss with a washerwoman from a one-horse town. But for the first time in years, she was curious about tomorrow. Bellwood looked smaller than Clara remembered. She walked down Main Street on feet that still ached with every step, bandages wrapped thick inside her boots. A week had passed since she'd left 7 days at the Brooks Ranch, eating 3 meals a day, sleeping in clean sheets, letting her body knit itself back together. Now she was back. Same boardwalk, same storefronts, same faces turning to watch her pass. But the faces looked different. Or maybe she did. Mr. Carlton stood in the doorway of the feed store, arms crossed, watching. He nodded as she passed. Actually nodded. First time in 3 years he'd acknowledged her existence. The preacher crossed the street, Bible tucked under his arm. He tipped his hat. Miss Clara? 2 words. More than he'd ever said to her before. She kept walking. The shack by the creek was waiting. The washboard. The cold water. The life she'd left behind. Mrs. Harmon appeared on the boardwalk ahead, coming out of the dry goods store with a basket on her arm. She saw Clara and stopped. Her face did something complicated, guilt. Maybe, or embarrassment. Hard to tell with women like her. Clara? She stepped forward, blocking the boardwalk. Clara, I heard what you did. The whole town's been talking. I just want to say... Clara nodded, stepped around her, kept walking. She didn't need Mrs. Harmon's words, didn't need her apology or her praise, or whatever she'd been about to offer. The woman had counted coins loud enough to humiliate her for 3 years. A few kind words wouldn't change that. The shack looked the same as she'd left it. Smaller? Maybe? The washtub sat by the creek, half filled with rainwater. Her washboard leaned against the side of the cabin, rust spreading across the zinc. Laundry waited on the line sheets she'd hung before she left. Now stiff with dust and sun. Clara took them down, folded them, carried them inside. The cabin was dark and cold. She lit the kerosene lamp, watched the flame flicker and steady. The shadows retreated to the corners. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, the tin cup on the table, the flour sack apron on the hook, the bed with its thin blanket and flat pillow. Home, if you could call it that. She sat on the edge of the bed, looked at her hands. The cracks were healing. Finally. The skin was softer than it had been in years. Thanks to Martha's salves and the week of rest. Tomorrow she'd start scrubbing again. The cracks would come back. The softness would fade. She'd be slow Clara once more, invisible and alone, surviving on 75 cents at a time. But something had changed. She could feel it in her chest, in the way she held her shoulders, in the way she'd walked past Mrs. Harmon without flinching. She'd carried a man 12 miles on bleeding feet. She'd refused a pouch of gold because her mother's voice still lived inside her. She'd looked a governor in the eye and told him the truth. She wasn't invisible anymore, not to herself. The sound of wagon wheels reached her through the thin walls. Clara stood, moved to the window. A plain wagon had stopped on the road outside, no markings, no fine horses, just a simple cart with a single driver. Thomas Brooks climbed down from the seat. Clara's hand went to her hair, smoothing it back without thinking. Then she stopped. Let her hand fall. She was what she was. He'd seen worse. She opened the door. Thomas stood in the dirt yard, hat in his hands, looking at the shack with an expression she couldn't read, taking it in the sagging roof, the warped boards, the washtub by the creek. Governor? Miss Clara? He looked at her. May I come in? She stepped aside. He ducked through the low doorway. And suddenly the cabin felt even smaller than before. He was too big for the space, too clean, too out of place. He stood in the middle of the room, turning slowly, and Clara watched him see her life: the tin cup, the cold stove, the bed that was barely more than a pallet. You live here alone. Have for 3 years, since my mother passed. Thomas nodded. He set his hat on the table, ran his fingers along the brim. Whatever he'd come to say, he was having trouble getting started. Your father doing all right? Clara asked. Better than all right. Thomas looked up. He's himself again. Clear as he's been in months. Doc says the walk might have done him good. Got his blood moving. Gave him something to fight for. He paused. He keeps talking about you. The washerwoman who saw him when nobody else did. Clara shifted her weight. Her feet still ached. He was hard to miss. Sitting there on that crate. 40 people missed him. You didn't. Thomas picked up his hat again, turned it in his hands. That's what I can't stop thinking about. Why you, why not anyone else? I already told you. Because somebody ought to. Thomas nodded. I remember. But that's not an answer. Miss Clara, that's a philosophy. I want to know why you specifically stopped when everyone else walked past. Clara looked at the lamp. The flame wavered in a draft she couldn't feel. Because I know what it's like, she said. To be passed over. To be nothing to nobody. She met his eyes. Your father wasn't nothing to me. He was a man who needed help. That's all I saw. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. The wagon horse stamped outside, impatient. I bought the old mercantile building, he said finally. The one on the corner of Main and 2nd. Been empty for 2 years since Mr. Hutchins died. Clara frowned. What for? A kitchen? A place where anyone who's hungry can eat? Where nobody gets turned away, no matter how they look or how much money they've got? Thomas set his hat back on the table. I've been planning it for months. Just needed the right person to run it. Clara's chest tightened. You're asking me? I am. I ain't educated. Can't do fancy cooking. You don't need fancy. Thomas took a step closer. You need heart. You got plenty. Clara looked around the cabin. The tin cup. The cold stove. The washboard waiting by the creek. This was her life. This was what she knew. But she thought about the ranch house, the clean sheets, the wildflowers, the quilt at the foot of the bed. She thought about Samuel's hand gripping hers in the dark of the line shack. She thought about the peppermint candy, lint-covered and soft, tasting like someone else's hope. Why me? She asked. There's 100 people in this town. Any of them could do it. Any of them could. Thomas's voice was steady. But none of them would have carried my father 12 miles on bleeding feet. None of them would have refused a pouch of gold because their conscience wouldn't let them take it. He paused. I'm not looking for someone who can do it. Miss Clara, I'm looking for someone who will... Clara's hands curled into fists at her sides, then uncurled. All right, she said. The mercantile building smelled like dust and old wood. Clara stood in the center of the main room, looking around at the bare walls, the empty shelves, the tall windows that faced the street. Late afternoon light came through the glass, filled with floating motes that swirled when she moved. Thomas had left an hour ago. The key sat heavy in her pocket brass. Cold. Real. Her key. Her building. Her kitchen. She ran her fingers along the wooden counter where Mr. Hutchins used to weigh flour and sugar. The grain was smooth under her touch, worn down by years of hands and elbows and leaning. The stove sat in the back cast iron, big enough to cook for 20 people. Martha had promised to send pots and pans from the ranch. Thomas had arranged for supplies: flour, beans, salt pork, coffee. Everything she'd need to start. Clara walked to the window. The street outside was quiet. Most folks were home for supper, sitting around tables with their families, eating food they'd earned or grown or been given. She thought about the people who weren't sitting at tables, the ones who wandered the edges of town, hungry and alone, the ones who got passed over, stepped around, forgotten, the ones like her. She moved to the shelf behind the counter, found the coal oil lamp Thomas had left there new, clean, filled, and ready. Matches sat beside it in a small tin box. Clara struck a match. The sulfur smell filled her nose, sharp and familiar. She touched the flame to the wick, watched it catch, flicker, steady, into a golden glow. She set the lamp in the window. The light spilled out through the glass, falling onto the dirt street in a warm rectangle. A figure appeared at the edge of the light. Clara squinted through the glass. A woman in a faded gingham dress, thin and tired-looking. A child clutched her skirt, a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, barefoot and wide-eyed. They stood at the edge of the lamplight, looking at the window, looking at Clara. Clara moved to the door. Her hand found the knob, brass, cold, real. She turned it, pulled. The door swung open. The evening air rushed in, cool and clean, carrying the smell of dust and sage and something else, wood smoke from somewhere down the road. The woman took a step forward, then stopped, uncertain. Clara looked at her, at the child, at the hunger written plain across both their faces. "Come on in," she said. "Supper's almost ready." There's a quiet weight that settles after a story like this one. It sits somewhere behind the ribs, tender and familiar, the kind of heaviness that doesn't ask to be named or understood. Perhaps you recognize something in Clara. Many of us have known what it feels like to be passed over, to carry kindness quietly without anyone noticing. Some of us have walked roads that felt longer than they should have been. Some of us have held words we never got to say and carried that silence for years. We've all been invisible at one time or another. We've all loved someone without being sure they knew how much. It's all right if this story stirred something that hasn't fully settled. Some things aren't meant to be resolved, only held gently. Then set down when we're ready. The feelings don't need to make sense. They're allowed to simply be what they are. A lamp in a window doesn't have to mean anything. Sometimes it's enough that the light is there. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.